Okay. Good morning. Benvenuti to the second day of the DEBEST conference. It's a big honor, Martin, to welcome Professor Martin Ender. He came all the way from Perth, Australia, and he was the chair in December 2022, last year, of the World Renewable Energy Conference, a very major worldwide conference on the transformation of our economies, our societies, towards the clean, green energy age. In the energy age, in Australia, you have got the new Prime Minister, and he declared as the key mission that Australia would become the next energy green superpower of the world. And since you have a vast country, you are a wonderful democracy, you have passionate people and engineers and scientists who know how to do the right thing. The world is waiting really for photovoltaics and hydrogen and smart energy from Australia. You are a chair professor at Murdoch University, have also a strong passion and contribution to developing economies. Close by is Indonesia. So you see the momentum really holistically, as Professor Andreas Weizsäcker outlined. Yes, we have to collaborate internationally to get the possibilities for a better future, for a sustainable future, in this case, with energy. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Achim. That was a very kind introduction and a very promising future for Australia you've outlined there. I hope we can live up to the mission that you've just outlined there for Australia. Now, I'm actually very happy to be speaking on the second day of this wonderful conference, because now I've had the chance to meet most of you, I think, and have a chat with you all, I think. So I'm feeling more relaxed, which is good, because there are many wonderful people in this room. Very interesting session we had yesterday, and gave me some wonderful ideas to think about moving forward. Now, what actually Elizabeth and Achim asked me to talk about today was the hydrogen age. And I know Achim, on his visits to Australia, took a particular interest in this and is very interested in how green hydrogen is unfolding in Australia. So this is something that he's asked me to talk about with you today. And in fact, most of what I'll be talking about is the research that I'm doing with some of my colleagues at Murdoch University, and that's not all of them. In fact, the key people, I believe, that are involved in this work are our Indigenous partners in the north of Western Australia. And that's why I put this photograph here on the front page, because as I go through this presentation this morning, actually, and I should ask, how much time do I have? What time?
45 minutes.
45 minutes, okay. So we have a bit of time. I hope you can put up with me for such a long period. Thank you for the opportunity. So I put this here because these are some of the Indigenous colleagues we work with. This is my very long time friend, Mr. Fred Spring. You know, he's an Indigenous man from Queensland, but spent many years now in Australia, and has worked on many different Aboriginal projects with me over the years all over Australia. But right now, you may have heard, actually, in the Kimberley region in the north of Western Australia, we had some big floods at the beginning of the year, and many roads and bridges and houses were washed away. So I wish he could be here with us, actually, but he is actually up there working now in the reconstruction project, rebuilding many of the Aboriginal housing that was destroyed in that flood. And this is also quite an important colleague of the Pilbara, Barry Taylor. His father was actually a very famous man in the Pilbara in the early resistance movement of Aboriginal people in the north. And so he runs a very large mining logistics company. And so we were able to partner with him for one of the hydrogen projects that I'll talk about today. And they were our industry partner for this hydrogen project in the north. And so some of you may have heard that last weekend was a very sad day in Australia. We had a big referendum, and very sadly it was defeated. It's a very sad day for the First Nations people of Australia, and actually all of this week is an official grieving period for them nationally because of this great disaster, which is what we call it in Australia now. Our country was not ready for this, and so it's very sad. And so I kind of also put this photo here because you can see the great expanse of Australia behind it. And that's in the next slide. And the great opportunity and hope, you know, that we can rebuild the trust with First Nations people in Australia in this great expanse of Australia. That's not what my talk is about, of course, but because these are our partners in this work, this is why I should acknowledge this. Something we do in Australia, if we are academics or public officials, sometimes private sector people and community people as well, but we acknowledge the country we are on. Now this is like a protocol, and because we like to acknowledge the First Nations people's country that we are working on and where we are. And so at Murdoch University, which is in Perth, Western Australia, in the southwest corner of Australia, we are on the land of the Noongar people. And in particular, we are on the land of a linguistic group, a subgroup, a tribal group of the Noongars called the Whadjuk people. And so, you know, we have many Whadjuk staff actually at Murdoch University. Aboriginal people, our numbers are increasing. It's a big target now. We even have a First Nations Chancellor at the university, and she's in charge of making sure, she's a Noongar person herself, she's making sure that we recruit more Indigenous students and staff. So this is a big goal. We have another campus as well to the south of Perth, and this is the Binjarab people. And this is where the town called Pinjarra takes its name from. And, you know, just as an example of the history that we were trying to acknowledge in the referendum last week, there's a very famous massacre that occurred here in 1833 when women and children were swimming across the river, and the British soldiers shot all of them. So we have a lot of reconciliation to do in the country. And this is why last weekend was a big disaster for us. So, but we have to keep working forward. So, yeah, that is the acknowledgement we normally do. And I'm not sure what the custom is in Europe. I don't know whether this is the land of the Etruscans or later the Romans, or maybe the Visigoths that came through, you know, but I don't know the history here so well. But this is our process of what we do in Australia. So this is, I think this is what got Uckham excited actually, is the big green hydrogen hub that is coming in. Yeah, well, we are connected through some of our research projects, and I will tell you a little bit about our study that we did. But what I wanted to do first is just introduce you to some of the major projects underway that Uckham thought was particularly exciting in Australia. And I'll talk about a study we did for this. But what the main point of the presentation this morning is to focus on some of the specific research projects that we do in this area at Murdoch University, which is not directly related to this, but of course one study is in a way, and this is the big dream, I guess, for the national government at the moment, is to make Australia the big green hydrogen hub of the world. Particularly this place here, Karratha in the north of Western Australia. You can see here, you know, and this is where I was doing several of the projects I'll talk about. And of course, Indonesia is running along the top here, which I'll also talk about. And Murdoch University is down here in Perth, and this is about 2,000 kilometres. So it's a considerable distance. And one day the idea is that we have a hydrogen highway. So all the trucks that come up and down here for the mining industry, 450 trucks a day at the moment, one giant truck every 3 minutes coming up here. We should, instead of running them on diesel, we should be running them on renewable hydrogen. This is the goal. but this is mainly about hydrogen export. I don't know whether it will ever be pure hydrogen or whether it will be green ammonia. But anyway, this is what is all being built up now. And interestingly, a Norwegian company, Yara, that already makes ammonia fertilizer from fossil gas, because this is at the moment is a big gas hub. All of this off here is big fossil gas, undersea gas reserves, enormous gas reserves. And this is a giant natural gas export terminal. Well, I don't call it natural gas, I call it fossil gas. It all goes to Japan, India, I think some goes to Europe. And Yara, this Norwegian company, has built the first green hydrogen pilot plant, because they will eventually convert to green ammonia. That's their goal. Now, if we move right back down to Perth, we have a very large industrial area, Kwinana industrial area. And these people, the industrial group there, have made a pact. They will transition to carbon neutral, all of these big, heavy industries. And BP, who you know is the global fossil giant, they are having a green hydrogen project here currently under construction. And, so this will be also leading the charge with green hydrogen in this industrial area. But Akam asked me to put this in the context of circular economy, because if we look at this BP project here, they will probably, as their water source to go for the electrolyzers and split into hydrogen and oxygen, they'll probably desalinate the seawater. But, so this won't be truly circular economy. This circular economy concept, we want to be fully, reusing, repairing, recycling, and have a fully integrated process so there's no waste. But what my suggestion for the people at this BP, if they want to achieve circular economy, is all of the sewage from the southern parts of Perth. This is about 2 million people in the capital city of Perth, and about half of that sewage, maybe a couple of 100,000 people, is going to the wastewater treatment plant down here at Woodman Point, but then it's getting pumped out to sea and gets wasted. And so some is treated here at a recycling plant in Kwinana, this Kwinana water recycling plant. But that's only about 10% of the sewage. So I think if BP refinery can take the other 90% and desalinate that and make the hydrogen for that, then you will have, maybe something more like a hydrogen circular economy. So in other words, put the treated sewage through your electrolyzer, and then you've got your hydrogen systems. That would give us a circular economy. But I think the real technologies that are occurring now that resemble circular economy are an American company, Sierra Energy, where they can take solid waste and convert it to hydrogen. So with Sierra Energy, one of our projects that we're planning for in the future is when the big iron ore mining companies in the Pilbara, over the years, have been ripping out all their old wooden railway sleepers, which are saturated in hydrocarbons, to stop the termites eating it. So this is very contaminated. They can't reuse it in any way. So one idea is that we take all of those massive mountains of wood, from 2.4 million wooden railway sleepers from Rio Tinto, another 2 million from BHP, another 2 million from FMG, and so on. There's millions and millions of discarded wooden sleepers. We burn them in a sustainable gasification combustion process and convert to hydrogen. So this is just one idea. The other technology is actually a local one. A company called Hazer is in that treatment plant actually already. This one here, this large metropolitan wastewater treatment plant, already in there, and they will convert the methane that's generated from the wastewater and convert that into hydrogen and graphite. So that's a technology developed in Perth, and that is now being constructed and installed also. But that's just the background to show you where Akam's idea came from to ask me to do this. So now I start the research that what we actually do at Murdoch University. And so in our renewable energy team, which I'm the chair of the environmental engineering program there, so I'm not directly within the renewable energy team, but we always work together. So for example, we'll work together on hydrogen, because you need water to make hydrogen, and environmental engineers are the ones that produce water. And we also work together on the energy transition and sustainable development projects. actually it made me, one point I failed to mention earlier, because, the excellent presentations yesterday, I should quickly go back, and I wanted to mention this, because what I wanted to say here was for the excellent presentation, like Professor Christian and Professor Ernesto, is he still here today? How you solved, this situation in Bangladesh with the sugarcane, and you understood what really the people were thinking, because they had the Nokia phone, and you made 3 points about, why this was good for them. This is an excellent way why we could interpret in Australia why we had a great success in one way, because 40% voted yes in the referendum, but why did the other 60% vote no? This would be an excellent case study using your methodologies. So I want to talk to you about this. How, yeah. Yeah, I had lots of good ideas about the speakers yesterday on how we can use this knowledge to interpret the disaster that happened in Australia last weekend. Maybe we can do that together. So one of the things we did at Murdoch University was to establish what we call hydrogen clusters. The national government funded different groups of people all over Australia to set up hydrogen clusters. And so we won the funds to do one in Murdoch University, and we brought lots of industry partners together, and this was able to catalyse a lot of activity with our industry partners in research, education, economic development, advocacy. So one of the outcomes for me was next year I start teaching a new course on hydrogen energy systems that will be in collaboration with industry. Now, this is actually the study I think that Akam was referring to and has asked me to elaborate on, because this study, Karratha, is where that big hydrogen hub is in the north. And of course, like anywhere, they have a local government, and the local government authority wanted to understand, we're going to get this massive green hydrogen industry on our doorstep. How should we position ourselves so we can really embrace this and get the maximum advantage of all these big companies that are going to come to the Pilbara and make green hydrogen? So the city of Karratha asked us at Murdoch University to do a study for them. And if I can escape out of this and just go in here, this was the result of the study. And Akam thought it would be a good idea if I just showed you. Now I wanted to just...
The key author of that concept.
Yeah, this is, so we came out with a number of policy development ideas, business development ideas, complementary industries, strategic partnerships, low-hanging fruit. Now the low-hanging fruit was a particularly interesting one that we recommend in the study, because we're thinking, how should we make sure that Karratha, the city, positions itself to really say to the world, we are the city at the centre of the green hydrogen revolution. So we thought some easy projects it could do would be to build the first hydrogen refuelling station for the hydrogen highway in Karratha at the council depot. And this is running on 100% renewable energy. Develop a standalone microgrid system for a remote community in the region. That, in fact, is one of our other projects that I'll talk about shortly in the Pilbara. And then show how the port, in fact, they have a massive port with all these giant ships that are shipping gas and iron ore to the world, how we convert that port operations to green hydrogen. So we explained how to do all this in this study. So then another one that GM Shafiullah, his name on the front slide. Another interesting project is like a little micro application of green hydrogen, how you can set up these micro units to run on renewable hydrogen, solar energy generating, and produce the hydrogen. Then you have a solar lighting system. It's just a little boutique project, but it just shows the many different applications that can be done with the green hydrogen. But probably the main one that kept me busy the last few years actually is again working with our Indigenous partners in the north, and travelling a lot, working with different communities, and looking at a few particular Aboriginal communities that are have their own standalone diesel power station systems, how we can convert these to renewable hydrogen, because the only way you can get 100% renewable energy in these remote areas is if you bring hydrogen into the mix. Okay. In the future, there might be other technology, but at the moment, we think it's way too expensive to do it with just solar and lithium-ion batteries. And the lithium-ion battery will get way too big. So we have to bring this size of this battery down, and scale up the amount of hydrogen that can be used. In the longer term, this will be the beneficial strategy, and this will have a payback period, we think, of less than 7 years. This is what our calculations showed. But Achim just asked me to elaborate on this. And again, if we go, we can see now this study has been launched by the state government. You can see here, this is what they call, because when we get funded by the state government, Western Australian government, we have to give the public knowledge sharing report. So you can all download this. It's from the Western Australia government, and that's our report.
We'll link that.
Yeah, and then this is the study here, actually. So this is what we produced, and the idea is, because it's a government-funded report, these are our partners, for industry partners for the project. Because that was an industry-funded project, let me go to quickly some relevant pages in there, like page 14, I think it was. These are the communities that we worked with, Jinpurinya and Warralong. There are 117 Aboriginal communities in Western Australia alone like this, and they are running diesel power stations. And so the goal in the long term now is, how do we get them off diesel and onto renewable energy? And we think hydrogen can be the way to do that. So, but it needs a lot more development work, and so this is the goal of this study. And so when we look across Western Australia, from here all the way down through here, this is the region I mentioned earlier that was flooded. This is the Fitzroy River. So this is where Fred is at the moment, and all of this area is flooded. The big bridge linking Western Australia to the east of Australia, this is the one big bridge here, completely washed away by that big flood. So all of this is under reconstruction. All the houses were washed away, and Fred's working there. But we have about 117 Aboriginal communities across here, about 10,000 Aboriginal people that live in these remote communities, running on diesel power stations, and that was the focus of this study. This is just some of the modelling we did. I mean, I haven't got time to go into the detail of the modelling, but we had a very good PhD student for that, very, very good on the ret screen modelling, the Homer modelling, and GM, he's an electrical engineer, so he was able to lead this side of it. And we were able to show, just in the long term, the patterns of the load and the energy supply that would come from the battery and the solar and the hydrogen. And this is the sort of modelling that we need to do to verify the design of the system. And so this one here is just showing how the system is operating. All of these communities are on groundwater sources. They're taken from the aquifer, the water. And so we have to desalinate that, and with the solar energy. And then this is fed into the electrolyzer. We produce the hydrogen. We run that into the fuel cell, and then that becomes the power supply for the community. So this is the during the sunshine, you can run that on the solar. And then when at night time, you're running more on the fuel cell itself, and the hydrogen storage, or when it's cloudy days. And it's just those few cloudy days a year, which means that the hydrogen can avoid the use of a big battery or the diesel backup. So what we did as well for the 117 communities is we showed a transition plan, how the state government could do this over about 10 to 15 years, because actually it's not a small cost. It's about $3 or $4 billion for the 117 Aboriginal community diesel power stations. So it's not going to happen overnight. We need about 10 years. And the most important thing is to start now with what we call co-design. In other words, we work together with the Aboriginal people and we co-design the systems. We don't assume this is just something done by engineers. We assume that the people themselves have the ideas. And we have to integrate the understanding of the people, how they see this renewable energy future coming as well, not just some outsider coming to do this. So we have this concept. We did this previously in another national renewable energy project, And so we have to be careful with this approach. So that was the study. And, you know, we showed typically a payback period of less than 7 years in our modelling. So we're working with the government, hoping they'll take this up. The next one is we're doing a project, you know, Perth, most of the houses are built with bricks. So it's a little bit of an outdated technology. So it involves all the wet trades and, of course, enormous embodied energy because you have to fire this green clay in big kilns and you have to burn a lot. In the old days, it would have been done with coal. These days, it's done with natural gases, they call it, fossil gas. There's a lot of gas that comes in a big pipeline from the north that Karratha place. And so our research was how we can convert these brick kilns to green hydrogen. And so this has been a very interesting project, and it's now leading into, we're going to start building some green hydrogen teaching facilities at the universities. So now I have a couple of my students actually designing these laboratory trials that we will do with that. And we have a small kiln that was given to us. I mean, these are enormous kilns that they use, consume enormous amounts of natural gas. We're just going to start with a kiln that big, and we're just going to convert the burners to green hydrogen. We start testing that shortly in the university. But in the long term, what we're interested in is, because Western Australia is a very big mining place, but sadly, most of those minerals are just, you know, the rocks are just crushed and put on ships and sent overseas, you know, so it's not a super intelligent society. We want to do more than this. Instead of just crushing rocks and sending them overseas, we build a metals industry as well. But, you know, in the past, of course, all of that was done with coal and gas. We now are working with companies, Suvo, Calyx and FL Schmidt, that have the capability. We're already seeing now the testing of large green hydrogen kilns. And a kiln is mineral processing, roasting, yeah, or like a smelter, you know, like a nickel smelter to make the metals under high temperature, and traditionally always done with coal. This is the most common practice around the world, still China, India, enormous volumes of coal exported from Australia and Indonesia and burnt in big kilns and furnaces and smelters, unbelievable amounts, you know, of all the greenhouse gases that are produced in this. So this is the goal ultimately. We have to convert these to green hydrogen. So this brings me to the next case study, which is Indonesia. And so I do a lot of projects in Indonesia. And in fact, we are very similar, Australia and Indonesia, because we're resource rich. We have enormous amounts of coal. Both of our economies are highly carbonised. You know, we're burning enormous amounts of fossil fuel, enormous amounts of coal still. I mean, a little bit different in scale, of course, because Indonesia is 260 million people and Australia is 26 million people. So 10 times the population. And interestingly, Australia has 16 coal-fired power stations and Indonesia has more than 200. So everything is like 10 times. You know, whenever we think about these concepts, it's 10 times, you know, 10 times the greenhouse gases, 10 times the amount of people and so on. And we have future energy demand challenges. We both now have coastal impacts from rising sea levels. You know, we have many coastal communities that are inundated. I go to towns on the north coast of Java and I'm walking around the village up to my knees in seawater because of sea level rise. This is happening already. It's not something in the future, it's happening now. So all of these towns along the north coast of Java, the coastal fishing villages, they're already underwater from global warming. And so what will happen to these mines, power stations and ash dams after coal and the towns and the communities? Both of these countries I've recently learned from and I'm working with my colleagues in Indonesia, they're very rich in battery minerals. And there's some strong geopolitical issues going on now because most of the nickel is in Sulawesi. And the Chinese are coming down big time and they're building enormous nickel mines and nickel smelters here. Massive, you know, so there's, you know, some, Indonesia is, you know, obviously wants to develop, but there's some geopolitical concerns going on there as well. And so these are raising some very serious policy implications. This is just a typical size Indonesia coal power, Suralaya power station just outside of Jakarta. And this one power station, we're working with these people here for their fly ash to convert it to geopolymer concrete. And this one power station is 10 times as big as all of the coal-fired power stations in south of Perth, where I come from, and there's 200 of these in Indonesia. 200 unbelievably enormous coal-fired power stations, probably bigger than anything in Germany as well, I imagine. So we have a big job ahead of us. Big job. It's not going to happen overnight. But the Indonesians, they love to do things in style. So we went on a trip. They took us out to some of their renewable energy sites a few years ago when I went there, building an enormous wind farm in the south of Sulawesi. And these are all the parts, the blades and the towers lying on the port in Makassar. Unbelievable project to get. It was about 100 turbines. They had to get big, I think they were big Enercon or Vestas. Can't remember whether they were Enercon from Germany or Vestas from Denmark. So they come from the other side of the world to Makassar, and then they're taken through these little country roads. I don't know how they did it on enormous trailers, and it's actually built now. So it's a beautiful operating giant wind farm. There's 2 of these now in Sulawesi with an enormous volume of wind turbines. And this is the area that we're working is in eastern Indonesia, because this is the least developed area. You know, very small villages, and this was the last area to get electricity. So some communities still are not even having electricity. But it's really quite remarkable what Indonesia has done, you know, as a developing country, because they actually have managed to get electricity to 97% of their population. 260 million people are developing it. So it's really a remarkable achievement. And of course, the main way they've done it is massive coal-fired power stations and transmission lines. And then most of the coal is coming from Kalimantan and South Sumatra, and they use barges. And they send the coal all over Indonesia in barges. And there's big coastal power stations all over. You know, there's more than 200 of them. And they ship this coal all over the country. And so, but you know, one thing I'll tell you a little bit about in another presentation is how we want to work here with you see the nickel mines up here, and they barge it down here, and then they do the smelters here, and then they ship this is Makassar here, and they ship the nickel back to China out of there. And so what we want to do is convert that to a renewable hub, and this is our idea. And so part of that, what we did was, we ran to do this in the longer term, we ran for the Australian government what's called a short-term award, Australia Awards Indonesia. And we had 25 people from Indonesia. We ran a training program. This is Professor Tanya Ermi. She's in charge of our renewable energy program. And so together with Tanya, we trained up 25 Indonesians on renewable energy. And we got many industry partners involved, you know, solar water pumping, explained many different technologies and introduced them to our local companies so we could create partnerships. And this is our final graduates. And in relation to this presentation now, Fendi, one of the graduates, he, all of them in fact, went back and did amazing renewable energy projects in Indonesia. But Fendi, you know, who I just showed there, he set up a company called Solaya Solar. And he just recently finished a project with the United Nations Development Programme and built 10 solar power stations in South Sulawesi. So what we want to do is, with our partners in Sulawesi, Hasanuddin University, and for that nickel smelter area, these guys have, Charul and Oki have, in their ocean engineering department, have designed the port for this smelter area, and we want to build that in geopolymer concrete that's running out of a geopolymer plant where these nickel smelters are, with all the mountains of nickel slag waste that they're generating, convert that to the concrete using hydrogen power. You know, so this is the research that we're doing with our colleagues in Indonesia. Here is there is Makassar, there is the Bantang industrial estate down here, and so the Chinese are shipping from central Sulawesi, Morowali regions, putting the nickel ore, and I don't know why they do it like this, but anyway, they bring it down on the coal barges, I guess. There's big coal-fired power stations along here, and they burn massive volumes of coal in the nickel smelter. There's one there. There's an enormous mountain of nickel, And that's just one smelter. And already this mountain of nickel, which must be, I don't know, maybe 100 times the size of this villa, and it's already almost completely landing on top of a very old village that's right next to it. And there's 8 more smelters coming. And I'm thinking, what on earth are they going to do with all of this waste? And it's phenomenal. So what we want to do is see if we can work out a plan. We build the geopolymer plant here, this big port, concrete port, that we see if we can build this with low carbon geopolymer concrete, which I can explain more about in the next presentation. So this is the concept, that we will develop, working with Fendi, using the solar resource, setting up the geopolymer plant, and hopefully we can use the hydrogen systems, integrate that into the local power supply scheme, and have this green hydrogen, green concrete, and slowly convert all that waste. But let me, I think it's almost time for me to finish now. So what I wanted to do was finish, in fact, with our first hydrogen project, because the thinking that went into this one, I think, is where there's some collaboration opportunities with the work that some of you are doing here. Because what we wanted to do in this concept is we have a state government agency that builds innovative demonstration urban projects, urban residential projects. And each time they build a new village, they always introduce a new concept. And so my wife Jo and I, we live in one of the first innovation villages that they built in Fremantle. And then the second village, which is under construction now, our village had like a solar microgrid in it. And then and it was running on a Power Ledger blockchain trading platform. So we could, using the blockchain, we could set our price online that we were willing to pay for the solar energy. And but in the next village, and only the apartment blocks had a battery in it. The houses had to have solar, but they didn't have to have a battery. But in the next village that's under construction now, they have a large community battery. Okay, so that's one step further to greater energy sustainability. And this is just conventional lithium-ion batteries, and that's in a shipping container size. It's only 36 houses. This is actually the development here, 39 houses and 2 apartment blocks. And so parked right here is the Strata battery in a shipping container, and EV charging stations. And so these 39 townhouses and these apartment blocks will all have shared solar, again trading on the platform using blockchain. And but what we want to do, it's too late to do on this development, but next time we want, instead of having the lithium-ion battery, which in Australia, high temperature, susceptible to fire, we've had a number of fires lately with lithium-ion big batteries, is we go to hydrogen instead. So this will be our proposal for the next project like this, with our state agency that builds these innovation projects, and so we have a model ready for it. But even we work with a company called Power Ledger, who I mentioned yesterday in that story, who do the blockchain energy trading. But one of the challenges, and this is why our state government electricity authority has not accepted Power Ledger yet we did a big research project with them, but they haven't fully embraced it. And we think maybe with the wonderful capacity that many of you have here in this computer science, how we can hook these systems into the grid, because it's all about how they interact with the grid and the software and the data interface, how you manage that system. And we have some of that capacity at Murdoch University, but I think amongst yourselves in Europe, you will have a lot more experience on this. So if we can do this project here with our WA government partners, and we set this up as a hydrogen, when we have surplus power on the grid, we can then generate hydrogen for storage. But it's how you develop the software to manage that interactivity with the electricity grid. This is the challenge. And so this is somehow we need to design a project around this. And so that is my invitation to you, is through your society, how could we work together and develop this project together? So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Dear Martin, we have to thank so much from heart for your world-class presentation. It clearly shows a roadmap for the world community towards the green energy transition. And it showed us the vast space of your country and the country of the Aboriginal people, and the huge context around you, like Indonesia, and the scale, the magnitude of the challenge laying in front of us. But very clearly, for your strategy and your engineering capacity and your vote for collaboration to the world, I'm sure we can all say, yes, we can. It's a Hercules activity. It's so realistic what you demonstrated. And yes, we can. And for universities, education and research, we have to start. I mean, the education is the nucleus. And to inspire young people, to inspire researchers to collaborate with industry, to collaborate internationally, that's the way to the future. And it won't happen next year, but it might take 20 years, 30 years, but hopefully not longer. And it also demonstrated on one side is like in Karata, the gigawatt projects, 26 gigawatt. On the other hand, the very core of renewable is decentralization. Photovoltaic with hydrogen, you have the small hubs, the small, let's say, cells, and connect it with visual ecosystem in a clever way to connect those in a user-friendly, sustainable, resilient, and way for the joy and the progress of all of us.
Yes.
Thank you so much from heart.
Thank you.
Now the floor is open. Question and answer as always.
Martin, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Martin, what I found in the past that every technology has its own like built-in frequency from the initial start to essentially full development, and everybody's using it. And so that's, I know the IT side. If there's a base platform technologies, it's about 25 years. And your technologies are even worse because they are heavily physical, right?
Yes.
So, and power plants, I know that's like easily 35 years. Now you are telling us, oh, we want to have these power plants implemented like in 15.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about this process, or this adoption process, to speed it up from 35 to 15 into a logical? Is it a re-engineering of the process? What will you do?
Oh, it's a good question. In fact, and there's a precedent. And I briefly mentioned this in one of the projects there. We had a national renewable energy project for the Aboriginal communities all across Australia, and we called it bushlight. Because in Australia we call the outback, we call it the bush. This is like the desert, the remote areas. Many of these places you have hundreds of Aboriginal communities all over Australia. I should add as well that 90% of the people in Australia, maybe even more than that, are living in cities. So I've got no idea, most of them, that this is, the situation of all of these Aboriginal people, how they're living. And that's largely why we had a defeated referendum, because, and this could be part of your, how you look at this, because that's 60%. I'd say a good proportion of them have got no idea how the First Nations people of Australia live. But anyway, this bushlight program did a lot of research first with the people in the communities to understand, what the needs were, what their aspirations were in terms of energy strategy, and working with the people in communities to build regional hubs. So this was like a regional approach. And so a number of the prototypes were developed at Murdoch University for these renewable energy systems. They were then developed further in Alice Springs in the centre of Australia, and then they were deployed into communities in partnership projects with the regional Indigenous organisations, and slowly rolled out and tested, and you know, the lessons learned in the partnerships. And then that program actually ran, the Bushlight program ran for about 15 years and rolled out many solar power systems to the communities all over Australia. So we think that is a strategy that works, in answer to your question. And that's why that transition plan was made like that for 117 communities with diesel power stations. And we think that can happen in 10 or 15 years. It is a big job, you're right, you know, and maybe in the long run, maybe it does take 35 years.
And to follow up once more, because so you have so many processes involved, the government processes, they have their own frequency, financial processes,
Yeah.
funding have their own frequency.
Yeah.
And all these, and so the adoption by users, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just solving the
No.
engineering type.
No.
That's probably 10%.
The smallest part, that's already solved, really, because the technology exists. It will be even 5 years before you could even start. So now, instead of 10 or 15 years, it's 15 or 20 years. So we're going to get closer to your 35 years. You're right. It won't happen easily. Mm. Mm.
Simple question. You say solar energy is turning solid waste into hydrogen, and hazel is turning liquid waste into hydrogen. How?
That's a series of chemical processes. The solid waste one is a gasification process. Okay. The hazer process is you have the sewage, okay, in the treatment plant. When you it goes to primary treatment, then it goes to secondary treatment, and then in the secondary treatment process of the sewage, you get sludge settled out. Okay.
That helps.
Now the sludge, already a number of years ago, this particular plant, they built big anaerobic digestion plant. So when you drive past there, you see these two big giant concrete eggs. You know, they're 5 times as tall as this building, enormous concrete digesters. That is producing the methane. The methane is used internally to generate electricity. Some is exported to the grid, but the idea is to convert that methane to hydrogen through a chemical process. So there's a series of steps in each one. Mm. We can connect those to the grid as well via blockchain, hopefully one day. If we have a number of those plants around Perth, then we get these blockchain systems, I hope.
So I want to get back a little bit to my question from yesterday, which is, how did you convince in Australia the population of investing into that? Because the lobbies probably rather wanted you to continue with fossil fuels and so on. So that means the natural process would have been one continuous deploying such plants. And from your presentation, it seems like you had a successful transition of the mindset of enough people to really roll that out, and even to missionize areas that are a little bit greenfield, which is maybe unique in Australia and Indonesia, to deploy there, which is a totally great thing. So how did you do that?
Are you talking about any of those particular projects in particular, like the Aboriginal community one, the Indonesia one, or the urban one?
I have not enough insights to specify more, but I'll be happy to learn about the most idiomatic or most interesting disruptive example you can tell.
Well, I mean, the Aboriginal community one, we already have the precedent with that Bushlight project I mentioned. You know, so it does take a lot of lobbying, though. I mean, the guy that I mentioned in Alice Springs, he would always be travelling to Canberra, to the national government, to influence the politicians. He was a very good champion. So you need champions of the cause to convince government to adopt this policy. It's just a continuous game like this to move the country forward in this direction. with Indonesia, we have from Australia, we have some Australian government aid program, like that short-term award call. We train the 25 Indonesians, so we can get this funding through the Australian government aid program. There is funding available in Indonesia too, and we sometimes can work with the national government electricity to introduce these new innovation projects. So we can do a little bit of both ways there. I mean, obviously, we're really starting from the bottom and slowly coming up because, of course, Australia and Indonesia are run by very big fossil fuel companies. You know, and these are very strong, powerful companies with good control over the government. You know, we had an example, like that big gas hub I mentioned in the north of the state. Our state government wanted to introduce stronger carbon emission controls on these big gas hubs in the north. And we have like big companies there like Chevron, Shell, and the Australian one called Woodside. And this Woodside one is developing an enormous offshore gas field that will totally destroy our commitments to the Paris Agreement if all of that greenhouse gas is released. So this Woodside did not like it. So the chairman, he rang up the premier of our state government, a democratically elected government, and he rang him up and he said, I don't like this carbon emissions strategy that you're doing. And the premier said, don't worry, I'll look after it. He rang up the president of the board of our Environmental Protection Agency and he said, stop that emissions legislation. He had to stop it. This is in a democracy, in a developed country. This is what the fossil fuel companies do. Yeah. So this is what we're up against. So, you know, they can destroy the rule of law with one phone call. So, you know, we have to work on the grassroots. That board chairman of that Environmental Protection Agency, he resigned. You cannot operate like that. So, you know, this is the challenge we're up against. And then in the urban one, this is a good one because the urban one, we have some very good people at the state government level again that want to drive innovation from within the government. So there, it's very good for us in the Curtin University that Elizabeth knows, and our university, Murdoch. You know, we can work with these state government agencies and help them with their innovation projects, and we will all work with them. You know, we won't necessarily demand a lot of funding to do that because we want to make sure these projects happen. So obviously we need the funding as well to do the research because we need to give the PhD students a stipend and so on and so forth. But at that level, we can work like that. So, you know, each level has different ways of working. But, you know, we have to try to find the path to get in there. It's always a long journey to do it. But,
yeah, but I have the impression you're much further than the guy in France.
Oh, I know you.
So therefore, it's great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. But you have the technology. Like, for example, in Germany, you have Siemens, which is producing the electrolyzers. We're not making those in Australia, so we have to rely on the partnerships with you. All of our solar panels are made in China, even by the academic that developed the world's most efficient solar panel at the University of New South Wales. You know, he couldn't get support in Australia, so went back to China. Now he's China's richest person because he built the solar panel factory there. And, you know, we get all our solar panels.
Exactly. Let's cooperate. And last year, get after about the future with Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker and Andreas Bett. And Andreas Bett, born in Furtwangen, he's the director of the Fraunhofer Institute for Solar Energy.
Ah, yes.
And hydrogen.
Yes, I went there. That's the first time I saw a hydrogen refueling station was at the Fraunhofer Institute in Freiburg.
And their slogan is, it's H2 move. H2 hydrogen to move.
Yeah.
And so we had the argument about the future, about energy and peace. Because that's also very much related to all these tensions and the routes we have to observe and so on. So if we marry engineering and sustainability, and if we put together the presentation of Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker, to have the global perspective and all the political process and the fairness between North and South, and your engineering capacity, your strategy, from the large to the micro and the smartness. Yes, we can. We can be optimistic for the future, but it's a Hercules international one.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Achim.